You ever hear the word folly? It sounds kind of old-fashioned, right? Like something you'd say about a silly mistake. But what if I told you that word has two completely different meanings? One is all about beauty and delight, and the other, it's a force that has literally brought empires to their knees. So, let's get into it.
We're going to kick things off with this pretty bold statement from the historian Barbara Tuchman. I mean, think about it. Why do governments, these massive institutions with all the money and all the experts, so often chase policies that are just obviously bad for them? It's a huge puzzle, and it goes way, way back. All right, so here's our roadmap. We'll start with what Tuchman called the March of Folly through history. Then we'll dig into the psychology behind it all, before we hit a really surprising twist. And finally, we'll look at the real price we pay for folly. Okay, so first up, let's be clear. When Barbara Tuchman talks about folly, she's not just using it as a synonym for mistake. No, she gave it a very specific, very powerful definition to describe this recurring pattern of, well, governmental self-sabotage. And this right here is the key. Folly isn't just a bad call. It's the active pursuit of a policy that goes directly against the best interests of the very people in charge. It's knowingly, or at least stubbornly, shooting yourself in the foot on a national scale. And Tuchman had some pretty strict rules for this. For something to count as true folly, it had to meet all four of these criteria. First, it couldn't just look bad in hindsight. People at the time had to be saying, hey, this is a terrible idea. Second, there had to be a better, totally doable alternative on the table. Third, it had to be a group decision. We're not talking about one single unhinged king here. And finally, and this is the big one, they had to keep doing it, even as everything was clearly falling apart around them. So, what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, unfortunately, history is just littered with examples of this kind of thing, and they often end in total disaster. The classic prototype, the one everyone knows, has to be the Trojan horse. I mean, the story's famous for a reason, right? The Trojans were warned by pretty much everyone not to bring that giant horse inside their city walls. But their leaders got together and chose to ignore all the evidence and welcomed the very instrument of their own destruction. It's the ultimate example of a group choosing a catastrophic path. Now, for a real-world case, Tuchman points straight at Britain's handling of its American colonies. See, the folly wasn't just losing the war, it was the entire policy leading up to it. Britain's best interest was in keeping a prosperous, healthy relationship with the colonies. Instead, they pushed policies that were guaranteed to tick everyone off, chasing a show of force that was going to hurt them no matter what, whether they'd won the fight or they lost it. Okay, so if these decisions were so obviously bad, even to people back then, why on earth did they make them? And to answer that, we have to jump from history into psychology and look at a sneaky cognitive bias that gets all of us. It's called the sunk cost effect. You have definitely felt this before. It's when you keep watching a terrible movie because you're already an hour in, or you keep eating at a buffet even though you're full just because you paid for it. Now scale that up to a government. It becomes continuing a failing war because of all the lives and money you've already lost. That past investment, the sunk cost, totally clouds our judgment about the future. All right, let me ask you a question. Imagine you're in charge of a big project. You've poured $9 million, that's 90% of your budget, into building a brand new stealth plane. But then disaster strikes. A rival company announces they've finished their plane and it's better and cheaper than yours, making yours basically obsolete. You've got $1 million left. Do you spend it to finish your now second-rate plane? Well, in a famous experiment, when people were asked this question without any mention of a prior investment, only about 17% said they'd spend the money. But when they were told they'd already spent the $9 million, a staggering 85% said yes, finish the plane. They chose to throw good money after bad. That right there is the sunk cost trap in action. It's an irrational decision, and it's driven entirely by the past, not the future. And here's where it gets even trickier. It turns out another psychological factor makes this trap even deeper. When researchers dug into this, they found that when we feel personally responsible for making that first bad decision, we are way, way more likely to keep pouring resources into the failing project. It's not just about losing the money anymore. It's about having to admit that our initial choice was wrong. So we've got governmental folly. It's disastrous, it's self-defeating, and it's driven by these deep psychological biases. But now, get ready for a complete curveball. because the word folly has a second, totally different life over in the world of architecture. So what is an architectural folly? Well, it's basically a building with no real purpose at all other than just to look cool. It might be designed to look like a little medieval tower or a Greek temple or a rusted cottage, but it's all a sham. It's pure ornament, built to be extravagant and interesting in a garden or a park.
Yeah, these things were all the rage back in the 18th century, especially in England and France. Wealthy landowners would build what they called sham ruins. So a brand new castle built from scratch to look like it had been crumbling for centuries. Or they'd stick a perfect little Roman temple on top of a hill, just for the view. Unlike political folly, which is deadly serious, these were built purely for pleasure and fun.
Okay, so we have these two completely different types of folly. One is this march toward disaster, and the other is basically a walk in a very delightful park. Let's put them side by side and see just how different they are. I mean, the contrast couldn't be more stark, could it? Governmental folly is counterproductive and ends in disaster. Architectural folly is just decorative and ends in pleasure. One is all about stubbornly sticking with a failure, the other is literally a beautiful fake. So how on earth can one little word mean two things that are so completely opposite?
Well, the answer is in the word's history. Turns out the French word folly, where we get folly, doesn't just mean madness or foolishness. An older, less common meaning is delight, or even favorite home. So an architectural folly isn't just a foolish building, it's a building of delight. And that is the beautiful irony at the very heart of this whole thing.
And that brings us to the big takeaway. While we might look at some extravagant, totally useless building and call it a folly, the truly dangerous folly, the one that really matters, is the one we can't see. It's that stubborn refusal to abandon a failing policy, that doubling down on a bad decision. That's the folly that carries the real cost for all of us.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Now that you know Tuxman's criteria, a policy that's counterproductive, that has clear alternatives, and is stuck with despite all evidence of failure, where do you see the march of folly continuing in the world today?